Dear friends, dear students, welcome to the fourth class of Comparative Politics PhD module. Today I'm going to speak about the interest groups and the differences between federations and unitary states. Dear friends, interest is something that actually fulfills our needs and provides us better conditions in our daily life. We might think about the interest as a form of political or a form of economic interest as well. For instance, while we are going to the work or while we are going to the school, we are trying to use the shortest way, the cheapest way, maybe the cheapest whistle, if there is any bus available, maybe by walking or maybe by our personal car. And actually we are trying to minimize the time duration and we are actually trying to minimize the expenses we are essentially spending to go to the work, go to the school. And such small needs, maybe sometimes they might be broader and larger needs. For instance, finding a better job, earning, better salaries, etc., are all our interests. Of course, interest is sometimes appearing in a form of demand for better political or better legal rights. So, trade unions are actually interest groups. They are defending the interests of employees, workers, etc. LGBT associations, they are as well interest groups. Student unions, they are interest groups. Trade unions, labor unions, non-governmental organizations, so on and so forth, all of them are interest groups and they are actually bases for people, bases for individuals, persons who have collective interests, and those collective interests actually lead the people to join their forces to defend their collective rights, their collective interests. Dear friends, pluralism is amongst the models of interest groups in countries. In the pluralist model, there is a huge number of interest groups in the country, but their members' numbers are not huge. So the pluralist interest group systems actually foresee interest groups that are smaller in size but larger in number. So much interest groups with fewer members. That is the logic. In such cases, they regarded as advantageous in defending the individual's rights and interests against the government. Theoretically, pluralism assumes that the society is largely fragmented and the decision-making should be based on a model that various needs and ideas are represented. This is the logic of pluralist interest group system. I have to mention something here. Even though the pluralism is identified with countries where the consensus democracy is dominant, such as Belgium, such as Switzerland, the interest group pluralism is actually typical with a country where they have a majoritarian type of democracy, and I'm talking about United Kingdom. In United Kingdom, the interest group system is a pluralist system. Robert Dahl, one of the most famous political scientists of our times, he claims that polyarchy is many various groups involved in decision making. Polyarchy. So it is actually a Greek word. Poly means more than one, multi, and archy means leading, ruling. So polyarchy is the rule of the many. In long term, the interest groups or associations to some extent replace the political parties as a bridge between the people and the government, because the civil society, the interest groups are actually well organized in some countries, and they are reflecting, they are conveying the demands of their members or the demands of the people whom they represent to the government. So in such a way, many people are actually relying more on non-governmental organizations or interest groups when compared to political parties in some countries. Dear friends, in the contemporary socio-economic and political structure, the business class is regarded to be powerful due to its organizational skills and its success in accessing to political decisions. According to pluralists, however, if the working class is to the same extent skillfully organized, they might balance the business class. So, according to pluralism, organization of the middle class and the working class is rather crucial in balancing the business class's power in decision making. According to Marxists, on the other hand, the pluralist type serves the interests of international business class. The business class is internationally organized, and their control over the economic sources makes them powerful. So, according to the Marxists, the pluralist model is nothing but a capitalist model. Corporatism, it's another interest group model, and it is dominant in Belgium and in Switzerland. I have to repeat something again here. Belgium and Switzerland are consensus and pluralist democracies, but their interest group types, interest group systems are corporatist. This term is crucial, corporatism. Please be careful with that. In the corporatist system, dear friends, there is a tripartite model. So the business class is represented, the labor class is represented, and the government is represented. So this is the tripartite model that is dominant in corporatism: the government, the business, and the working class. In other words, employees, employers, and the government. In corporatist models, the interest groups are fewer in number, but they are huge in size. That is to say, there are few associations, there are few interest groups, for instance, trade unions, labor unions, LGBT associations, so on and so forth. They are few in number, but they are huge. Their number of members are huge. Many people are attending to their associational ties. Many people are becoming their members, so they are very powerful. And due to the tripartite character of corporatism, they are very capable of having direct contact with the government and with actually the business class. And this is actually the typical form of interest group model in Northern Cyprus as well. In Northern Cyprus, we have a tripartite corporatism. And for instance, in the committee where the minimum wage, minimum salary is decided, there are representatives from the government, there are representatives from the employees, and there are representatives from the employers. So you see there is a tripartite management, and actually the labor unions in North Cyprus are few in size. There are not so much trade unions or labor unions in North Cyprus, but many people are members of those labor unions that are actually tiny in number. According to the corporatist model, the greater and more organized an association, however, fewer people capable of speaking to the government. And of course, there might be in a labor union 1,000 members, but just 3 or 5 people amongst them capable of talking to the government. Of course, not everyone has the chance to talk to the government. This is another fact. And actually, in corporatist models, there is a criticism now against the corporatist model. The group leader asks for the other members' consent for what he negotiates with the government and the business class. This is another question. Does the group leader all the times ask for, what he or she is doing? Is there a consultation with the other members of the labor union? This is another question, because sometimes there might not be such a consultation. And such negotiations are not accountable. I'm talking about the negotiations between the government, the employees, and the employers. Okay, one trade union or labor union representative representing the employees, attends to the meetings, the tripartite meetings, and represents the employees. But to what extent this is reliable, that's a question. According to Katzenstein, liberal corporatism is a form of corporatism where the business class is dominant, and social corporatism is a model of corporatism where the labor is dominant. And according to Professor Leiphardt, in Belgium and in Switzerland, actually the liberal corporatism is dominant. Dear friends, another topic for today is actually the areal distribution of power in contemporary states. And we are going to talk about two different models, as all of you are familiar. The one is federation and the other is unitary state. The most typical federation in the world is actually United States of America, one of the most typical, I would say. And one of the most typical unitary states in the world is the United Kingdom. But there are two different governance types. In federalism, there is a share-out partition of political power between central and regional governments. Regional governments have some autonomy and authority for their internal legislation, execution, and judiciary, but they are actually parts of a wider concept, a wider context. So the states in the United States of America, they have their internal judiciary, they have their internal execution, they have their internal legislation, but at the end of the day, they are parts of the United States of America. And no US state can, for instance, declare war on a foreign country. Who declares war? The president. So the central government. Federations are generally established in societies where the local groups preserve their regional or cultural identities but have the willingness to establish political partnerships. For instance, United States of America was once upon a time composed of colonies. European peoples, they came from the European continent to America, they established colonies there, and once towards the end of the British rule in America, towards the declaration, towards the struggle of independence against the British in America, those colonies actually realized that they could establish partnerships and they could live together. Dear friends, federalism is considered to be more advantageous for cultural diversity in political representation because in some countries, some regions are composed, the majority of some regions of some countries are composed of some specific ethnic groups, and the federation actually balances the ethnic groups that are smaller in size with ethnic groups that are larger in size. This has such an advantage, but not all the times advantage. Sometimes the lack of elite accommodation in such cases in federations might lead to ethnic conflicts. And federalism is considered to be more advantageous in larger societies. There is a clear separation of powers, actually not a clear, sorry, there is a separation of powers between central and governmental authorities. Some taxes gathered by the regional government, but some other taxes gathered by the central governments. There is a typical example, as you might see in the slide as well. Hollywood movies is a typical example. What is the typical example? Well, all the times there are local polices in the Hollywood movies with FBI policies, and they all the times argue with each other, they all the times fight with each other, and they don't really like each other, and that is reflected in Hollywood movies. This is a reality. Why? Because there are overlapping and contrasting authorities between the central government and regional governments. So the contrasts between FBI and regional police forces is a reality. And this is actually a disadvantage of federations. There are contrasting and overlapping authorities between center and the regions, and sometimes it is difficult to judge whose authority, whose decision is that. Who is authorized to take action on some specific issues. Dear friends, in the federations generally, the state has a written constitution, and the constitutional authorities of central and regional governments are documented, they are written. And there is a constitutional mediation. A Supreme Court or a constitutional court is authorized to resolve the conflicts between regional and central authorities. And there are some linking institutions, and in such institutions, regions are represented in federation, for instance, via an upper house in legislation. For instance, what is the upper house legislative organ of United States of America? Of course, it is the Senate. And in the Senate, all the states of the United States are represented. And another form of governance is unitary state. The political power is gathered at one centralized body. And there are regional governances in unitary state as well. However, such governances do not legislate. They follow the central legislations. For instance, let me give you an example. While there are death penalty executed, while there is death penalty executed in some states of the United States of America, there is death penalty, but in some other states of the United States, there is no death penalty. But in United Kingdom, there is no such differences, because the United Kingdom is a unitary state and has one central legislation. On the other hand, United States is a federation, and it has, in addition to its central legislation, it also has regional legislative bodies as well. So this is a crucial difference between unitary states and federations. Dear friends, that's it for today's class. I'll be pleased to meet you in our next class. Enjoy your day. Thank you for listening.